Alrighty, it's almost time to install the cylinder heads on here. So I cleaned up the pistons as best I could, cleaned up the deck surface, and I'm ready to drop the cylinder heads on. I cleared myself a nice open space between the engine and the frame, and I got the wires up out of the way, so it should go pretty smoothly. One thing I want to do is I want to make sure I blow out all the bolt holes for the head bolts to go into. Now I got a whole brand new set of head bolts. I've read quite a bit on this, and you don't actually have to get new head bolts. You just have to measure the old ones. They're not a torque to yield bolt like everybody thinks. They're actually a torque to angle bolt, but with 165,000 miles on it, I'm not taking any chances. So I just got all new bolts, and I also got this here. All this information is right at your fingertips, guys. Just get on your phone and you can find all this information out. So I got the torque sequence. I just Google searched torque sequence 6.1 liter Hemi, and then I also Googled the torque specs. So it's a 3-step process: 25 foot-pounds first, then 40, then an additional 90 degrees on the head bolts. And then the smaller, I believe those are 8mm bolts. They just are a 2-stepper, 15 and then 25 foot-pounds. And then the rocker, somewhere around 17 foot-pounds. I looked it up, it was 195 inch-pounds, which is like 16.2 foot-pounds. So I'll probably set my torque wrench to, I'll probably just set it to 17. Then it should be just fine. But I could set this down right here. Once after I get all my head bolts in, I'll just set that down right there. Got my torque specs, got my torque sequence, and yeah, that works for both sides of the cylinder head. So I'm gonna go over here and check it out. We've bolted the long tube onto the head, and I removed both of the oxygen sensors because those were really a pain in the butt taking that out. And when this goes in, I kind of just want to sneak it in there and drop this as flush down onto the head gasket as I can. I don't want to damage the head gasket in any way or shift it or do something when I drop the cylinder head on. So that's why I removed the O2 sensors, and that's why I'm just going to take my time and just guide that in easy. But if I come over here, before I drop the cylinder head on, what I want to do first is I'm just going to take compressed air and I'm going to blow out each of these holes here where my head bolts go. I'm just going to blow all those out with compressed air, make sure all the junk's out of them, and then once that's done, then I'll come in, drop my cylinder head on, and torque everything down. Just take a rag, that way you keep a lot of the debris away from everything. Some of these might have quite a bit of water in them still, so. When you put your head gasket on, you want to make sure the dowel pins are in the block. And you also want to make sure that there's a little spot on here that says up. You want to make sure you can read up on the head gasket when you put this in. And then as a final check, you're going to press that onto the dowel pin there, both sides. Make sure it sits on there nice and flush. Then as a final check, You're just gonna look at it and make sure that any hole that's supposed to be opened up is opened up. Any hole that's sealed is sealed. These are not directional. These are just up is up kind of thing. Just make sure everything looks like it lines up. All the bolt holes line up. Now, you are going to have some holes that probably won't line up with anything, but as long as a majority of the holes line up, it should be good. The part numbers are both the same, so I think the only thing you got to look out for on this is you just have to make sure that you have the head gasket going up. So we do. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take and drop the cylinder head on this sucker here. Now, set it down here quick. Let me re-grip this sucker. Right there's good. Hold that on. Take these bolts and start threading them in. Like I said, once I get the one in, that'll hold it in place enough. It's not going to go anywhere because it'll have that bolt plus the dowel pins holding it. And I can start to thread the rest of them in. That was trouble-free, kinda. Let me go get some sockets wrapped. Alright, one thing to note, when you're doing this, you want to make sure that your bolts are threading in easily. You don't want them to be binding, you don't want them to be tight. You want to make sure that they're threading in easily. You know, because if you've got any type of binding or anything like that going on, then you need to stop, take the bolt out, maybe blow a little bit more compressed air through it, and then start over again. Because the last thing you want to have happen is have a strip bolt cause all kinds of chaos. And then the other thing to keep in mind when you're tightening these down is do not tighten any of them all the way down. I tightened a couple all the way down too much. Or I tightened a couple of them too much, and you just want to back them off. You want to make sure they're all hand tight before you get crazy. Reason being, this stuff will not align perfectly, so if you tighten one down super tight, it may bind on another bolt somewhere else, and if that's the case, then you could end up actually breaking something, whether it be the engine or a bolt or something. You could end up damaging something. So take your time. You've taken your time to this point. You know, nothing should cause you to rush at this point. I mean, if I don't get this done by the dyno appointment, I'm not going to be too upset. I mean, I'll be slightly upset, but I'm not going to be that upset, especially if it's something that I need a bolt or need something. So take your time. Alright, we're just going to speed through this thing, and when I get to the torque sequence, then we'll stop it again. Alrighty, so all the bolts are torqued, so I did these in 2 steps. They're at 25 foot-pounds. Those are done. I'll probably go back after I'm done doing these to a 90-degree angle. Probably go back and just verify it. They're still at 25 foot-pounds. But what I'm going to do now is I am going to just mark my bolt. I just have a chalk marker here. So when I write on stuff, it just, I use a chalk mark. So what I'm going to do, the goal here is to move this 90 degrees. So it's going to be like this. 90 degrees is just going to be like that. So the way I can indicate that is I can just put a line straight up the bolt like that, and I want that line to go from this way to this way, and then that'll be 90 degrees. So I'm just going to go through and label all my bolts. Get a decent enough line on them. And this is kind of the cheap way, so you don't need to get an angle wrench or anything fancy like that. You just rotate it till it's 90 degrees, or from straight up and down to sideways. See if I can reach this one down here. This one might go sideways to straight up and down. That might be what we're stuck doing on that one. So that's going to be the oddball down there. So everything's nice and visible. Alright, now I'm just going to take the breaker bar I have here, give me the most leverage. It's a nice thing about chalk, you just wipe it off and it goes away. That'll dissolve in the engine oil in no time. But it serves the purpose for right now. So, I mean, even with your wrench, you could start, you know, straight up and down and just go to a 90 degree. So see where it actually catches the bolt. So it's got to go 90 degrees from that, or I just have to spin the bolt enough so that it's 90 degrees when I look at it. So I can take the ratchet off, I take the socket off, and I can readjust. There. Grab the camera. There is 90 degrees. So quick and simple, quick and easy. You know, these things are cheap, a couple bucks at Walmart. You can get a set of them. And I'm just going to finish up doing the rest of these at 90 degrees. And then this cylinder head will be ready for some push rods. Alright, putting the push rods in. And it's pretty simple to figure out. These are aftermarket ones, but they're meant for this setup here. So no measuring necessary, because I didn't really change any of the dimensions. I didn't take anything, I didn't machine anything off the head, I didn't machine the valves in any way. So nothing changed. These are just stock length push rods. They're a little bit heavier duty because I am going to be revving it out a little bit higher. But they said the factory 6-1 push rods are just fine for this. They work without an issue. And it's very easy to tell which push rod is which, because the intake push rods are 6 and 650 thousandths in length, and the exhaust are 7 and 850 thousandths in length. So the exhausts are almost 8 inches, and the intakes are only 6.5. So if you hold them up next to each other, yeah, you should be able to tell the difference on what's intake and what's exhaust. And then before you put them in, you want to blow through them and make sure they have a nice tune like that. But you just making sure that they are free of obstruction. If you don't want to blow through them, you can just look through them, make sure that the hole is open and there's nothing inside there. You could even spray brake cleaner down there. You could put some oil down there, but you just want to make sure that all of them are free of any kind of debris in there, because these do feed oil up to your valve train. So you don't want a piece of fuzz or something stuck in there, because that would be a bad day. I'm just going to take a little oil. I have a little 10W4, or not 10W, 0W40 in this bottle here. I'm just going to dip the push rod in it, and I'm going to put it in the engine. I'm going to feel to make sure that it's sitting in the pocket of the lifter. That's sitting in that pocket. And when you push these in, they'll actually, if the cam lobe is away from it, it'll push it down until the lifter actually hits the cam lobe. So these are pretty straightforward as far as where it sits on there. You'll be able to tell when it's sitting in there correctly. This actually isn't the difficult part, getting it to sit on the lifter correctly. The difficult part comes when you go to put the actual rocker shafts on, and then you got to get the actual push rod to sit inside the little pocket on the rocker shaft. But just take your time. Again, everything is very like slowed down. Don't rush. There's no need to hurry. Just take your time and get this right. Don't want to do this job again, trust me. So those are in there, and then I'm just going to take some of this Comp Cams assembly spray, and I'm just going to blast it down in the hole there. Again, I don't want a dry startup, so anything I can do to prevent that, I will. The oil is probably going to be red in color, but that's perfectly fine. I'm also going to take and spray my springs down with this stuff. It's what I bought it for, so I'm not going to spare it. I'm going to use it. I say, when this thing starts up, I don't want to really hear any noises at all, to be honest with you. The only noises I want to hear are the lumpy cam noises, and that's it. I don't want to hear lifters ticking and tapping, none of that stuff. I mean, it'll probably happen. I mean, I've heard a lot of these things start up, and there's going to be a little bit of that, I'm sure. But if I could prevent most of it, that's what I'm going to try and do. Alrighty, one of the most important things to do, I pulled one spark plug from each cylinder over there, because I now want to make sure that all my push rods are connected to my rocker shafts. And the one way to do that is to spin the engine over and see if my valves move up and down. So they should open and close. Each valve, you should hear pistons moving around. See valves moving up and down. Make sure all of them are moving. Looks like every single one has moved. Hell yeah. And you can do it a couple times. That's why you put lots of lube on your cam, lots of lube on everything else. But it looks like every valve is moving just fine. Now I'm going to leave all those spark plugs out because I'm going to do the same exact thing on the other side. But this side here is done. Everything's torqued. Everything's set up on this side here. Went relatively smoothly. So I'm just going to move on to the other side. Hoist that big bad thing in place, and then at least the big jobs will be done. Then it gets down to the little stuff. So keep plugging away. Alright, we have both cylinder heads on. The rockers and rocker shafts are in on both sides. I spun the engine over several times, making sure that all the push rods were properly seated on the rockers themselves. All the valves open and close, and everything's looking good. So we're going to throw the valve covers on, and then I'm going to put the radiator in, alternator on, hook up the serpentine belt, and then finish off with throwing on the intake manifold. And then I think I'm going to call it a night. I ended up getting a new heater hose pipe, because I didn't want to risk it with the other one. It's just a little rusty around the front of it, so I just went out and got one of these. They had it next day, so it wasn't a big deal.